dirt road in a gooseneck, saddle up with me. Dry land in God's country, crops far as I can see. The headlights on both ends of my heat day. This country life is for me. Ride with us, HPJ. Ride with us, HPJ.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jennifer Latsky, and I am the Associate Editor for High Plains Journal. I'll be your moderator again for this last session of High Plains Journal's first ever virtual sorghum and wheat U. And on behalf of all of us, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us over the last 2 days. We hope that you've gotten a lot out of it. It's been a lot of fun learning this new platform and sharing it with you folks. For 70 years, High Plains Journal has been a weekly fixture in your mailboxes. I know that's how it was at the Latsky residence. Today, we have expanded from our flagship print publication and our online website, hpj.com, into more platforms to reach you. Many of you are signed up to our weekly HPJ direct newsletters for wheat and sorghum, and that might be actually where you heard about this. If you would like to receive more updates on other topics, be sure to head on over to hpj.com/signup. Just select the topics you'd like to learn about each month, and they'll be sent directly to your email. By the way, we also offer a free weekly podcast, HPJ Talk, featuring myself and Kayleen Scott, with commentary, news, featured interviews, and more. And in fact, our theme song has been used for our introductions here on the virtual sorghum and wheat U, and we really appreciate that. You can find us on iTunes, Google, Spotify, and you can subscribe for free via those services for notifications each week when a new episode drops. We're also on the website, hpj.com/podcasts. Now, like all of you, we really wish we could be conducting our sorghum and wheat U in person this year. I know I miss seeing old familiar faces and meeting new ones, but safety just had to take place. And so we and our very gracious and flexible speakers and sponsors have pivoted to this virtual platform. It's just one more way High Plains Journal is showing that we are committed to you, our neighbors. Now, I'm sure many of you have had some experience with Zoom, the webinar platform, over the last couple of months. For those of you who may be unfamiliar and haven't joined us so far during our virtual events, let me share some notes on how this will work. First, as you came in from our waiting room, we have muted your video and your microphones. If you have any questions, and actually we love questions, that's why we have this platform, what we'd like you to do is click on the chat box that's below on the bottom of the screen and type your questions in the pop-up box that will appear to the side. We've built in plenty of time to ask questions during the webinar, and you can actually submit those at any point in time while the speakers are speaking. All of these sessions will be recorded and have been recorded, and those recordings will be posted soon after we're done at the hpj.com/SUWU website. That's the same place that you registered to attend this event. The schedule of all of our sessions and speakers was posted there as well. And remember, you can share our session recordings with folks in your immediate groups that may not have been able to attend. And now, we want to thank all of our great sponsors for helping us put on our virtual sorghum and wheat U. You will be able to find more information about them and the services and products that they have to offer in that registration packet and materials that were emailed to you this week. You can also find more information online at hpj.com/SUWU. And now it is time to get started with our first speaker, Brady Huck. Growing up in Dodge City, Kansas, Brady Huck's diverse ag background and boots on the ground experience allowed him to bring a grassroots approach to his grain and livestock customers today. Brady has spent his career in the feed yard and in the field before opening up his brokerage branch with advanced trading. Brady, welcome to the program, and the screen is yours, sir.
All right. Hopefully my presentation's up and going. Thanks for the introduction. Glad to be here. Glad to be a part of this event. Had the privilege to do it last year and glad to be asked back today. So, I'm Brady Huck. I'm from Dodge City, Kansas. Dodge City is home for me. Risk advisor and commodity broker. Give you guys gotta flash up the standard disclaimer. Because I am a commodity broker, there's a risk of loss in futures and options trading, and any situation we talk about today are hypothetical going forward. So Advanced Trading is the group I work with. My branch is based out of Dodge City, Kansas, and I work with farmers, livestock producers on managing their risk. Advanced Trading is based out of Bloomington, Illinois. We have about 100 employees, 30 of which are probably our commercial brokers. They work with country elevators, ethanol plants, resellers, and then branch brokers like myself focus primarily with farmers and ranchers. Having two segments of our business like that gives us a unique approach and a unique perspective into what's going on the buyer side, the end user side, and what's going on the production side, that allows us to kind of see both angles rather than just focusing on one or the other. We don't buy physical bushels. We don't trade physical bushels. We're simply consultants and advisors, and our job is to help our customers. So without delaying, we'll just kind of jump right in it. And what a time it is to be a sorghum producer. After a few years in the back seat, sorghum is front and center again. And I'd be interested to know, for the person, I'd ask you all to raise your hands. How many have been reached out to over the last few weeks about selling this year's sorghum crop? Basis market's extremely attractive, and it's actually a premium to corn. So what a great time to be a sorghum producer. China really hit sorghum market hard, and sorghum was probably the first commodity that suffered from the trade war. In April of 18, they introduced an anti-dumping policy and taxed U.S. sorghum imports 100-some percent, 170%, and basis market just collapsed overnight. Corn and beans, that followed the May-June timeframe, but sorghum was really the first one that got hit by China. So it's great to be back in the limelight and up front and center here. So looking at that export, the export picture of sorghum on this slide here, let me get my little pointer. Hopefully that'll work. Focusing on the bottom right graph here, the purple is China, and China's back in the market, significantly buying more grain sorghum than they bought the last few years. 18 was the worst year, but 13 through 17, they were a strong participant in the market. Great. It's when we're participating in an export market on grain sorghum, that's an ideal time frame to be a sorghum grower. When we're not selling and producing exports, we're just going to be feed replacement value to corn and going into a feed yard or an ethanol plant at 80 to 90% the value of corn. So getting demand to Mexico, China, and other markets is fantastic. On the chart to the left here, the left side of the screen, that's our Milo sales, looking at a 4-week rolling average. An interesting component of this is the purple shaded area here is the 5-year average. And November through February has been really the strong export time frame for these Milo sales. But you can see the green line here. We had a decent early program, no feast, but it really shut off December through March. And mid-COVID, China came to the rescue, I guess, and bought a bunch of Milo. And we've seen that kind of continue. So this latter half, quarter 3, quarter 4 exports of the 19-20 marketing year has really come and bailed the sorghum balance sheet out and helped drive basis mid to the end of the year. Looking at, this is the dreadful fundamental sheet, and I won't bore you guys with this stuff too much. Fundamentals can put half the crowd to sleep, so I try to be careful how deep I go, and it is what it is at the end of the day. Today we had a WASDE report. The USDA released a world ag supply and demand estimates. One of the biggest changes came when USDA upped their yield for this year's crop, 9 bushels an acre. ATI's number as of Monday was 77.2, so we're still a little bit ahead of the USDA, but expected that the crop has improved dramatically over the last month with the rainfall we've received in Kansas and the High Plains, putting us pretty good yield potential there. So that raised production 44 million bushels. Looking at, and we offset that some with increased exports of. They upped that 40 million bushels to 260 versus 220. ATI, I'm using our Monday numbers, and I would imagine we'll up that a little bit this coming Monday to keep up with USDA a little bit. But we're, one difference on our 1920 numbers versus the USDA's 1920 numbers is USDA still remained at 210, and we're at 180, mid 180s on our exports. With that results in a little bigger stocks to use ratio that we're going to carry forward into 2021, which then in turn combined with our export number trailing a little bit, our stocks to use ratio on sorghum is not quite as tight as USDA's is. But great to see them increase the export picture and the demand picture going forward from the USDA's perspective. They're anticipating more normal type of export program at 260 million bushels. You go back 18-19, we're at 93 million bushels. 17-18, 2 to 350s were kind of par for the course prior to the trade war. So hopefully things stay afloat and the USDA is right with their prediction, and maybe it'll get bigger. So some of the key fundamentals of sorghum going forward from my perspective is obviously the feed grain crop size. How big is it going to be? 2.7 billion bushel carryout for the corn crop. Does that continue to get bigger? And, globally, of course, what's going to happen there? How burdensome will the carryout be that we have? If we put a 3 billion bushel carryout in front of it, on the corn side, that's going to impact corn futures, which is a component of your cash basis. Will export demand continue from China? We've got a Ukraine corn crop that's bigger than it was last year, and very logistically, it has some advantages being closer to China, and price-wise and storage-wise, they'll need to move it. So that will hit the market October, November, December timeframe. And will China keep buying U.S. sorghum once the Ukraine crop hits the market? So it'll be very interesting to see how China's buying pattern continues going forward over the next 6 months. One thing to keep in mind as we talk about sorghum, the components of your local cash price are your local basis, and it's based off of corn futures. Sorghum doesn't have its own product on the board. It used to for a brief moment in time, but lack of volume caused them to pull it. So we've got a really attractive local basis. We're looking at 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s over for new crop bids versus historical, even 20 over, 20 under type of bids. But corn futures being a piece of that component, you've got two different crops there that you're kind of managing on your price component. So if you separate the basis from the futures, you've got to be very careful doing that, because we could continue to have strong milo demand, and that corn crop could continue to get bigger, and maybe the corn future price doesn't have to get better, maybe it gets worse. And then if that happened and export demand stayed strong, you could see that basis continue to strengthen. And what you thought you were locking a good basis turns out to be a ho-hum basis, or a good basis, but not the dollar type basis or $1.30 type basis. So be careful. All basis contracts were put on probably with the best of intentions, and they're either really good or really bad, I guess. So be careful how you manage that. Transitioning a little bit to wheat here. U.S. wheat acres, each year it's kind of kind of silly. I feel like deja vu the last couple of years where an article has come out that talked about the lowest winter wheat acres in the past 100 years. And then the next year, the lowest winter wheat acres in the past 101 years. It'll be interesting to see what you guys do this fall, especially with feed grain prices where they're at. Will there be more wheat acres? Will we kind of reverse that trend or not? Certainly be interesting to see. But 30% fewer wheat acres than we were, and winter wheat acres than we planted in 2000. That's significant. But world wheat acres are actually up since 2000, and we've seen some volatility with those numbers and the number of acres that are out there. But if you look at production from a world wheat perspective has been on a steady uptrend, and we're producing 30% more wheat than we did in 2000. USD actually lowered production today by 3 million metric tons, but we're still above last year, 766 million metric tons versus like 764, I believe, was last year. So we were at 769 ahead of this report. So the volatility in the acres doesn't necessarily, reflected in the actual production, and global wheat yields across the globe being a little easier to produce, and closing the gap there. Another big, component of and thing that has changed over the last really 40 years, but more so in the last 20, is Russia, Black Sea, Ukraine wheat. FSU is former Soviet Union, and their 2001, their share of the world wheat exports was 5%, and that is projected at 36% here this year. That's significant change. The U.S. is a residual wheat supplier. That it seems like we're always 10 cents away from beating Russia or Ukraine tender offers. They've got a logistical advantage to a lot of the global wheat consumption where it's consumed. And when we get, when Russian wheat prices break, it seems like U.S. prices kind of follow suit and are always just about 10 cents underpriced at a price disadvantage to Russian exports. So looking at stocks to use from on the wheat side, burdensome picture for global stocks. But if you throw, where are those stocks? You take China out of it, and we're much different picture. So we go from 154 days of use down to 90 days of use. And what that means is if we didn't raise a crop this year, we stopped production, we would have 154 days theoretically of supply that we could use to get us halfway through the next year. And we'd have half the wheat essentially. You take U.S. out of there and it gets a little tighter. So looking at, kind of just summarizing the fundamentals ahead of the wheat crop. Obviously the global crop size, what's going to happen in the EU. The USDA lowered the European Union wheat production by 4 million metric tons today. They also lowered Argentina, but they raised Russia and Ukraine's production in today's WASDE report. That Southern Hemisphere production, arguably, Argentina could be the biggest opportunity for exports of U.S. wheat to make its way into Brazil. But Australia's having a pretty good year, moisture-wise, much different than the last few years they've had, battling an epic drought. And their crop could very certainly get bigger as well to offset it. So, the feed grading situation, what happens there? There's a saying, a rising tide lifts all boats, and a tide that's going down kind of lowers all boats as well. What happens to corn? Wheat has a $1.72 premium to corn, at least Chicago wheat does. That's been from $2 premium down to $1.50 premium. And corn can be wheat's best friend, and it can be wheat's worst enemy at times. So what happens on the feed trading side will definitely have an impact to what happens with wheat going forward. The U.S. dollar, I didn't put that on there, but it's really cratered over the last 4 weeks. What happens with the U.S. dollar going forward will also impact our export competitiveness and the price we get for wheat. Then, Northern Hemisphere, La Nina, a lot of chatter about that. How many acres are we going to plant and what's our weather going to be like going into the winter and the spring? Production and demand, supply and demand, that's kind of the name of the game, and that's what determines price for the biggest part of everything. So that's it with fundamentals. I'm not going to drag it out anymore. We could go a long time and talk forever about fundamentals and go down a lot of rabbit trails. One thing I like to say or share is don't mistake knowledge of current fundamentals with the ability to forecast prices. We've got a research team in-house at Advanced Trading. They're economists. They're very smart and could give you a 2-day course on what's going on with everything in the world of commodities. And you'll walk out of that meeting and you might have an idea that price will go higher. I might have an idea that price should go lower. And we both probably have a 50% chance of being right. Fundamentals change, technicals change. You don't know when the next COVID or when the next trade war or mad cow disease, anything's going to come in and wreak havoc on the market, or a massive flood situation that causes funds to cover their shorts and send the market higher. So it's impressive to hear people rattle off the Argentina soybean crush and what's happened with India wheat acres, but from a producer's perspective, I think it's good to understand some of those factors as what impacts your price in the global picture, but not to get too biased one way or another that China's flooding and this market just has to go higher. So be careful how you view expertise and data and knowledge and how that's interpreted into predicting prices. So when Jenny asked me for a title for this presentation, we were mid-lockdown, and this year, 2020, has just been one for the books. It's wild. We all know, we all live it, and we can't wait to get to next year, I think. But this meme just cracks me up every time I've seen it. Doc's in there. Just pick any other year than 2020. Don't pick 2020. We don't want to go there. We know what happened. So, there's always something. It seems like we never have enough sales on when the market falls apart. As we think about executing a marketing plan and implementing your marketing plan, what stops you from making sales? And I would say there's basically two things, and that's fear of missing out, fear of prices going higher. If I sell today, it could go up tomorrow, or it can't go down any lower than this. It has to go up. I'm not going to sell here. Or the fear that I can't raise the bushels. My wheat is drought. We haven't had rain. I got a terrible stand. I just don't know if I'm at 30 bushel wheat or 60 bushel wheat or 80 bushel wheat. How am I supposed to go market? And it's extremely challenging and stressful to make those decisions when the market presents opportunities. There's a reason it's presenting those opportunities, because there's a challenge out there a lot of the time, especially the great opportunities, the 470 corn. Well, corn's going to $5. Corn's going to $5.50. And maybe I sold half of my crop at $4 or $4.20. I can't sell too early on the other half of my crop. So I think if we look at it as, if we look at it as a black and white of we either do nothing or we make sales, we end up with these half right, half wrong marketing programs where we've made some okay sales, but I know I'm going to sell 50% of my crop, and the other 50% of my crop I'm not going to do anything with until after harvest. And so we end up with some okay sales, and if we raise the other half of our crop, some okay sales potentially. Some years those will be okay sales. And if there's a lot of volatility in how your marketing plan works year over year over year, if it's just black and white. So what ATI tries to do, and what we try to help you do, is operate in the gray and incorporate options into your plan so you're protected in between your targets. You have a floor, you know where you stand, and you're letting the market kind of tell you when to make the decisions you need to make and give you that flexibility that you need, but having that control as well, so that you're protected when things go against you. So using a put, I don't know how familiar, we'll kind of just step back basics here. Options 101. So a put is the right to sell futures at a specific price at a specific time frame. Buyers pay a premium for it, and you buy a 320 put for 10 cents. That's what you could have bought today on corn or to hedge your Milo. But it defines your downside, your futures downside price risk, and it allows you to gain on your cash bushels if the price rallies. So you still have the opportunity. You're going to go make a sale at the elevator or with the end user eventually. It just establishes a price floor on the futures component, and you pay a premium to do so. A lot of times puts can get a bad rap because they compare them to sales, and I would highlight this bottom piece right here. It is a placeholder for a future sale. You can't compare a put to a sale. It will always be second best to a sale, because if you sold, you paid a premium for it. So if you chose to sell grain at $4, but would buy a $4 put for 20 cents and the market goes lower, that $4 sale is going to look better than that put on paper because it's an actual sale. If the market goes higher, that's when that put really shines, is you pay 20 cents, and if the market goes up 50 cents or 60 cents, you get to go make a sale there, and that's certainly much better than that $4 sale. So we view puts as a bullish position where the market continues to go higher, you're in great position to make that sale. But if it goes lower, you're protected. Another route we go is making sales and using call options. A call is the right to own futures at a specific price for a specific time frame. We use making sales and buying calls to reward rallies. Futures price puts on 20, 30 cents, and you feel like you ought to do something, but you just think if you keep going higher, make a sale and buy a call. If it keeps going higher, that call is going to help you add to that sale. It allows you to reward that rally, capture that market gain, retain some upside, and be proactive with your plan in case it falls back and goes the other way. You've done something. So making a sale and buying a call, it defines your futures price risk. You retain upside, and you can use it to extend your marketing opportunity. So you could sell these corn or November, December Milo today and buy a March call to extend your opportunity. If corn futures continue higher, you've captured that attractive basis of today, but you've set your futures for and defined your futures risk. And if corn futures have to go higher between now and February, you get the potential to add to that sale. It also, establishes a delivery time frame. I've worked with some guys, and you've got to get your bin cleaned out by February, March, and you call the ethanol plant or the feed yard, and I'm booked up. I can't get you until June or July. Well, if you go out and make a forward cash sale or capture the carry, it establishes that time frame where you're locked in, where you get to go deliver to them in that window, and you don't have to store and deliver it during April or May when you're busy out in the field, if that fits your situation. The other benefit is, stop and storage charges. Storage 4 or 5 cents a month, spending 3, 4, 2 cents a month on a call. You can get a lot of time in this low volatile environments where I've bought some, there's some opportunities out there with July calls where a guy can get a lot of time, and opportunity for the market to change, that really is less expensive than storing the physical grain till then and having the risk of lower prices that whole time. So, so the gap, we talked about a couple different flexible solutions, using options, but it's not just about buying puts or buying calls when you make sales. You're managing market volatility. You're making decisions. You're establishing a floor, and it puts you in control. So you buy a put, and the market goes up, and you've got your put coverage at 320. 320 and the market goes up to 360. You got a 40-cent gap between where the market's at and where your coverage is. We've got to manage that gap between where you're covered and where the market's at. And we do so by either rolling that put up or making a sale, getting out of that put and converting that put to maybe a call option. You wouldn't have to get 100,000 bushels covered with puts. You go sell 100,000 bushels. You might buy back 50%, 75%, 25% with calls. But we're managing the gap between where you're covered and where the market's at. And it's not about did the put make you money or did the call make you money. It's about managing where the market's at and where your coverage is. It's one thing that really differentiates what we do from what a lot of other people do. But establishing that floor with a put is a starting point, and it puts you in a position where you can have the patience to wait for a better price. But if this crop gets bigger and corn futures break down to 280 or wheat futures go down to $4, you're covered, you're protected. So hopefully that makes sense. The other thing, take a drink here real quick. What does good look like? This is an interesting business, and there's a lot of brokers out there, a lot of different ideas on how to use the tools. We all have access to the same tools, but how we use the tools is probably what differentiates all of us from each other. And understanding what good looks like from a producer's perspective. Is getting a positive return on your hedge account or your 1099, is that success? Is that successful marketing? I would arguably say no, it's not. You're never 100% hedged. You want your hedge account to back you up and give you the ability to make good cash sales. A hedge is a hedge at the end of the day. And if you want to just use futures, there's a time and a place to use futures. But judging success and what good looks like based off of did your hedge account make you money or not. If your hedge account made you money, you didn't sell good cash sales. In a lot of cases, if it's a true hedge. So a common analogy is comparing a hedge account or a put with crop insurance. You buy a put, and do you judge success by did the put make you money? No, you don't judge success on the crop insurance by did you collect on your premium. It covered you and allowed you to market your grain in case Mother Nature came and wiped you out. And if you collect on your crop insurance, you're probably not happy with your yields. Definitely not happy with your price. Homeowners insurance, you buy that, you don't want your house to burn down. And life insurance, that you don't want to collect on that either. So, understanding what perspective of what does good look like, and the number of people that are satisfied that I work with Brady, and Brady made me 50 cents on those puts. Those guys, it's kind of interesting that what makes somebody happy, I guess, in making 20 cents on a put or 15 cents on a put. In reality, making a great cash sale and losing 10 or 15 cents on a put probably is better financially for your operation and your bottom line, because I doubt you covered all your bushels with puts, because typically we never have enough on when it breaks. So I won't dig too much further into that, but understanding perspective is, I think that's important when you develop your marketing plan. So key principles going forward, prices impossible to predict. I spend a lot of my time trying to prevent guys from being overly bearish or getting overly bullish, leaning too far one way or another. The market doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to go up. It doesn't have to go down. It just doesn't have to do anything. I think if producers focus on their P&L and understanding, the guys on the forums said it great yesterday. I don't remember who exactly said it, but what's my cost, and at what point do I cover my cost? And if I can cover some of my costs by marketing a percentage of my crop, I better be doing that. And we got to know our numbers. That was another comment that got said in that farmer panel yesterday. Knowing your numbers and having the confidence to, okay, I raised 80,000 bushels of milo. I can go sell 40, 50, 60 versus crunching the numbers on the spot. And I got to figure out how many acres I plant. I don't know what it's yield. I got to drive around and go look at it, and just being ready to go when that opportunity presents itself, because we've seen them all too often that they change really quickly. They don't last forever. And how many times have we missed that sale by a penny or 2 pennies or 5 cents? We just weren't ready. I think you guys wear a lot of hats, and you can't do everything. You got a crop consultant, you got a precision ag guy, you've got an insurance guy. I feel confidently that you got to have a marketing guy, somebody there that's calling you, telling you opportunities when they present themselves, and pushing you when you need to be pushed, because you might be working on an irrigation motor or a tractor and trying to save some $100, $500 service charge on a call to fix something, and the market moves 10, 20 cents one way or another, and or an opportunity presents itself and you got to be on top of it. Having a plan and just perspective of what am I doing? Am I defining my risk? It just keep grinding forward. So last thing, I guess, there's a lot of noise out there. We have access to got a smartphone. Every one of us have one of these, a computer in our pocket where you've got as much information as the guys at ADM Cargill's, all the best traders in the world, the grain guys in the world. You've got information at your fingertips, and you got to be careful with misinformation in today's day and age, and be careful what and who you listen to and how that impacts the decisions you make going forward. You don't want to listen to the radio and that person was bullish, so I'm bullish today, and I listened to the radio the next day and that person was bearish, so I'm bearish today. You've got to level out those emotions and focus on it. Just be careful who you listen to and what you listen to. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic formula to marketing. It's tough. Decisions are tough to make, and you just got to make them. And I feel like this industry needs to enable you to have flexibility and opportunity and not box you out when things get exciting and you get a great opportunity where markets take off. That's when we need to be able to benefit from that versus getting boxed out. 2011, 2012, it did a lot of damage to guys' psyches on marketing plans. You think you sold 50% of your crop and drought comes through or hail. We've all been through it. You might have gone through it this year where you got hailed out and you sold what you thought was 50% of your crop turns out to be 150% of your crop. And that one is one you remember for a long time. There's just a reason that we can't use sales for everything. And we've got to incorporate some of these other tools into our marketing plans. So that being said, contact info's up there. I'd love to have more customers, new customers, see what if I'm a fit for you and you're a fit for me. My email address is there. Shoot me a note. Call me anytime. You can look me up I have a Facebook page at Brady Huck ATI. If you put that in the search bar, that'll pull up my Facebook page. Appreciate a like and a follow there. But hopefully you got some value out of this, and ask Jenny go back to some more questions maybe. Oh, one last thing. Thank the High Plains Journal for having me back and being nimble in this event. It's we have been through a lot this year, and I think it's great to have personal interaction and be able to get on here and share information, communicate with each other about what you guys should be doing in these difficult times. And thank High Plains Journal for continuing on and being nimble with this. And I can't wait for Cattle U coming up as well here too.
Thank you for that, Brady. Yeah, it has been an interesting 6 months. And don't forget, folks, if you've got questions, just click on that little chat button at the bottom of the screen and type them into the box that pops up. And Brady, while we're waiting for those, I've got a few because you've been interviewed by me before, so you know how it is.
Oh yeah.
It sounds like China is going to be a pull on the markets globally for the foreseeable future. Do you see anything changing that? If they haven't, if African swine fever doesn't get handled, or if there's something else? Is there anything that's going to stop that freight train?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're a tweet away, right, Jenny? And, we've seen that happen in the past. So we've got an election coming up. It's a big election, and I'm interested to see how the rhetoric changes if, depending what happens out of that election. I don't think the volatility in this market's over. You always have to take the information coming out of China on the price. The Dalian corn futures have been running like crazy for the last month, and what's the flood? Is there flood damage there? There's rumors of that. How tight are they on their reserve stocks? They've been releasing reserve stocks. What's their situation over there? And like you said, the ASF, do they have that under control as well? Or are they rebuilding that big population? There's a basket of crazy unknowns that are ahead of us.
A basket of crazy.
Yes.
It cracks me up. Speaking of situations that are out of our control in Mother Nature, our friends in Iowa had just a horrendous derecho day before yesterday, and our hearts go out to them, and we're seeing some massive destruction right across the wide swath of corn country. We're seeing the pictures. What is that possibly poised to do to our demand for sorghum or for wheat for feed grain?
Good question. Excellent. Yeah. There's some crazy numbers out there. 10 million acres potentially. You take 10 million acres. If that's 100% destruction at 200 bushels an acre, you're talking 2 billion bushels, which that's pretty extreme, right? Our numbers, we would correlate 35 to 200 million bushels potentially lost in production, but it's still really early. Satellite imagery is going to be key, and getting out, seeing what's actually out there. I think that'll be key over the next few weeks to see what happens. And timing of that, the timing of it, if it's June and that corn's growing right before pre-tassel, corn is really susceptible to green snap at that point in time versus post-tassel. It just, laid it over. It's going to gooseneck it up and be a nasty mess to come in and harvest. And the insurance companies, you know them, not to bash insurance by any means, but, they sometimes like you to go out there and cut some of it too. And that's always fun for producers to have to go through. But
I can imagine.
200 million bushels on the balance sheet. We added 200 million bushels today with the uptick in yield going from 15 billion bushels production to 15.2. So you take 200 million bushels off the balance sheet, we're right back to where we are. We're 2.5, and that tightens things up. That a little bit. It's still a 2.5 billion bushel carry out. So that would, going back to that sorghum corn futures piece, basis is a component of that price. Corn futures is a component of that price, and you could see some volatility there because if corn futures rally, basis may come down a little bit. If corn futures go down, basis could go up. And if the value of that sorghum is flat, and corn futures changes. So it's very dynamic, interesting deal trying to market sorghum with those two components.
So I thought it was interesting to hear, I can't help but take it personally since I started as an ag journalist in 2000. In the last 20 years, corn or wheat acres have gone down 30%. So was it me? Was it something I said? Was it something I wrote? But not to make light of that, but do we see, folks like you have constantly told me the strength of the U.S. dollar has a big role to play in our wheat sales. Do we see any movement there? Any hope in the horizon?
Yeah, the global currency pick. I'm not an expert at that by any means. So to even kid myself with trying to talk about it but the U.S. dollar is one piece, and that U.S. dollar index is a basket of other currencies and relative to those other currencies. So global fiscal policy and U.S. fiscal policy, they're two pieces of the puzzle, which are a lot of pieces of the puzzle. Brazilian real moves, Japanese or Chinese yuan moves. There's just, I'm not a currency specialist, and it's broke a lot. $96 on that U.S. dollar index was a key line of support going back for years, and we've tested that. It'll be interesting to see what kind of goes back to the election and everything else with the economy going forward. There's just a lot of crazy that can happen.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions here. So, any final thoughts?
No, it'd be interesting to see what happens ahead. And I think being proactive is, one of the biggest keys to executing a solid marketing plan through the chaos. Stay flexible, but get control. And, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity and thanks for having me back.
Well, hey, thank you, Brady. And, we'll see you on the trail. Okay, buddy?
Okay. Thank you.
All righty. So while we get our farmer panelists lined up, folks, we want to take a brief moment to recognize some of our sponsors for today's session.
Kauffman Seeds is your full-service seed company carrying our Midland Genetics brand of high-yielding corn, soybeans, grain sorghums, and forages. All the latest technology traits, herbicide options are available.
Midland Genetics corn hybrids and soybean varieties, whether traded or non-GMO, are selected and tested to perform and give farmers in Kansas and Oklahoma the best results possible. We have many dealers throughout southern Kansas and into Oklahoma. Call Kauffman Seeds today for a dealer in your area.
So sponsors like the following really help us bring opportunities like High Plains Journal's Sorghum and Wheat U to you. EGE Products, Copperhead Ag Products, Protect the Harvest, Ward Labs, AGI Suretrack, Alta Seed, Kauffman Seed, Kansas Wheat, Heartland Soil Services, Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission, BASF, S&W Seed, Shield Ag, and American AgCredit. Thanks so very much to all of those sponsors, and we want to draw your attention to the digital program that was emailed to all registrants with information about our lovely sponsors. Well, now, folks, it is time for the hallmark of all of our High Plains Journal U events, the Farmer Panel. Joining us today, we will bring our farmers here on shortly, but because we had 2 days of speakers, we decided to have 2 days of a Farmer Panel this year. Today we'll have part 2, discussing the trends and technologies and the opportunities that we're all looking forward to in the last part of 2020 and beyond. If you missed part 1, which we were talking about the 2019 and 2020 crop year and the lessons we learned and the challenges in growing wheat and sorghum, you can catch up with that recording at hpj.com/SUWU. And joining us today, we have Charlie Haas, sorghum farmer near Larned, Kansas. We also have Kent Martin, farmer and consultant near Carmen, Oklahoma, and Eric Purvis, a wheat farmer near Weskan, Kansas. Gentlemen, welcome, and I will make sure that we get your video to going. First off, I'm going to let each of you, again, give us a brief snapshot of what your operations look like, so we might get an idea of your rotations and your production methods for those that couldn't join us yesterday. So, Charlie, let's start off with you. And I'll let you explain a little bit.
Hey, I'm a dryland farmer here in Larned, Kansas, farming grain sorghum, dryland corn, and wheat. I do a wheat summer follow summer crop type program, farming about 4,000 acres here in kind of central Kansas. Also an Alta Seeds distributor, so I work with a lot of different customers, moving sorghum and forage sorghums and stand grasses around central Kansas.
Okay. And Kent, next.
Sure. I'm from Northwest Oklahoma. I farm wheat, grain sorghum, among other things, sesame recently, soybeans, forage crops. Operate a Angus cross cow-calf operation. Also do consulting on legal and research issues related to agriculture. So a lot of expert witness type work on different disputes and debates. And also serve on the USCP board, the Sorghum Checkoff Board, and the Oklahoma Sorghum Association. So a few things going on there. Operate mostly no-till. Far northwest part of the state, everything is dry land.
Okay. I'm really glad that you could carve out some time for us today and yesterday, Ken. It's been real fun to catch up with you, even virtually, buddy. And now, Eric, tell us a little bit about what you do out in western Kansas.
Sure. So I farm wheat, corn, milo. We raise some pinto beans. We have dry land and irrigated. Sell certified seed wheat, and I guess that kind of covers it in a broad stroke.
Well, I know that you're a very busy man too, and we appreciate you coming on out and joining us. So let's get started. We usually kick off with the topic of agronomy, and we heard yesterday from Romulo Lalato and today from Nick Ward about soil fertility and requirements, and we also heard from other speakers about nitrogen and sulfur management. So how do you manage your nutrients, your nitrogen, your sulfur, phosphorus, even the micronutrients in your wheat and sorghum? What do you use for your decision making? And Eric, I'll have you kick us off.
You bet. I work with a company. I work with Farmer's Edge is who I work with, and we do do zone sampling, and then write scripts based off of that zone sampling. Also some withdrawal rates based on harvest yields. We're trying to look at a lot of different things. We use a fair amount of sulfur because of our pH here, trying to help. I don't know that we can move our pH necessarily because it's not cost effective, but we are trying to use it to at least buffer our seed zone and whatever we can there to help us out. Zinc was one that was talked about. We use some zinc in some of our products to try to help out with some of the micronutrients. We're using some broad stuff of strip till and putting fertilizer on, but we're also kind of trying to feed it as we go with in-furrow applications as we're planting. On our irrigated corn, we're putting applications on through the summer to get our nitrogen all on, so that we can spread that out and hopefully get more utilization out of it. And also, like last year, we had a lot of hail and we lost some corn, and we were able to cut out some of our applications of nitrogen and cut some of our costs that way. This year, with the yields looking like they are, we'll probably put another application on fields above and beyond what we planned on, and that gives us the flexibility to do that.
So before we move on to the other fellas, is there your soils out that direction are very, distinct soil type. Is there anything else that you're a little bit concerned about when you're looking at your soil samples and what's your your benchmarks for you?
We look at several different things. We're watching our phos levels, obviously our nitrogen levels. And we're trying to manage that by zones rather than on a grid or on just a whole field. And so we're trying to look at it on smaller pieces of the field and manage those more individually and how we're applying stuff.
Okay. Charlie, same question, what are we looking at as far as managing your nutrients in the Larned area?
Well, my ground I don't farm across a huge area, but it's kind of, it's divided into two parts. Part of it, as I get down closer to the river, is, we have problems with low pH. So we've done some various sampling, and variable rated some lime, trying to deal with some of those issues. As I get to the other side of my operation, we go to high pH as we get into some of the limestone outcroppings. So I need to move part of my pH from one side to the other and it'll be perfect. But I'm a big fan of dry fertilizer starters of wheat. We're putting a lot of fertilizer down now with the air seeder. I like that program. I think that's really helped our wheat yields. Then loose soil sample. Big fan of starter fertilizer on a planter. Most of my nitrogen on dry land, it's awful tough, particularly with terrace grounds for in-season applications. So most of my nitrogen's going on down on my summer crops before we plant in one form or another. But we have started doing some foliar feeding over the top. We're having some pretty good luck with that. Particularly in a year like this where we don't have enough fertilizer down, it's an easy way to add a little bit and try and take advantage of this moisture.
Okay. And Kent, let's see if I can unmute you. There we go. Kent, same question. What are you concerned about there in your part of Oklahoma?
Well, I expect Nick Ward and I went through graduate school together, so I expect he covered everything that we needed to cover. But no, just a shout out to Nick. We had a great time in graduate school together, and we both focused on soil fertility and plant nutrition. So that was kind of my thing. I farm in an area that has very diverse soils, that has a pretty incredible transition from the typical red Oklahoma clays to some deep coarse sands. So we deal with a lot of different things. Having said that, one of the first things I try to do is to better understand my ground. I have some pieces of ground that are relatively consistent and some that are highly variable. Some that are flat enough you can shoot a deer from a half a mile away, all the way across the field. Others that are heavily terraced and have that change as you move across that landscape. So understanding those helps us to more easily understand how important variable rate and other technologies are for us. The things that we use, of course, basic soil testing to get an understanding of that. Along with some grid sampling and zone sampling. We've done both, and we've used different tools to help us to better understand that. Then, of course, other things that we do, of course, starter phosphorus fertilizer is becoming very important for us to take care of that need to get some early season vigor out of some of our plants and crops. Then also using remote sensing to better understand those high nutrient needs. So we use a green seeker sensor. We put out nitrogen rich strips. We try to understand where are those deficiencies, what is our yield potential, and what do we think we can really reach with that yield potential. Other things, and I mentioned, and I know last time on the farmer panel, I stole a little bit of Josh Lofton's thunder by talking about the barrel with a hole in the bottom, but that's one of those things that I think about a lot. If I am limited on a major nutrient, it doesn't do me much good to apply a micronutrient. Having said that, there are some crops that respond more to some micronutrients than others. So we try to understand that within the crop that we're given and then use that as an opportunity to cap out that yield potential. To be real honest, sometimes in our budget situation on our crops, sometimes our focus is the major things, and we honestly bypass some of those micronutrients because the budget says we're going to focus on the big things and we're not going to spend the money on the little things that don't make as much of a difference. Okay. Then I think the last thing I would add to that is tissue testing. We'll occasionally do tissue testing to identify those areas. Also try to take note and log where those problem areas are in the field and identify that deficiency so that in the future we can better understand what areas of the field we likely need to create a different application scheme to take care of those deficiencies.
Okay. Well, now, moving on, we heard from Brett Bean a little bit earlier today about the advancements coming to sorghum in the pipeline. And Kent, you are on the USCP board, and you've been part of those conversations. We also heard from Kansas Wheat about the Kansas Wheat Innovation Center and how we've got some advancements coming out of there as far as research projects that are going to be revolutionary for wheat varieties. It seems like we are in a sweet spot of a revolution of new seed varieties with new traits and new discoveries, especially in the sorghum world right now, but wheat in the future. So, Kent, I'll start with you. What are you excited about as far as this next era of production of sorghum and wheat?
Well, I think short term, it's the stuff I need in the field today. It's the disease competitiveness. It's the on sorghum, the big one, of course, is the herbicide tolerance. Those things that really impact us today, I think that's really exciting because let's face it, a lot of us farmers and a lot of the people on the meeting today are really wanting to make it to next year. And when we make it to next year, we'll worry about the next year. Well, then there's the long-term things. We know that the breeding techniques and the advancements in our varieties and our hybrids take a lot of time. And that's exciting to me because that's the future of our industry. We have to do that to stay competitive. And one of the things I think from a wheat and a corn standpoint that we have to think about is we look at how the advancements are going in some of our other crops, corn, beans, and in the past, it's been a challenge to keep up in terms of the increase of bushels per acre per year. And these advancements, I think, put us on a more even playing field. We are positioned to see a difference in that trend. What I expect we will see is we'll look back in 10 or 20 years and we'll say, that was the time when we put a different slope on that curve, when we started increasing by more bushels per acre than we ever have in the past. And I think that's what's exciting.
Me too. Charlie, you work with Alta. You sell some amazing seeds to some great customers all over the country and on out down into parts of Oklahoma. What are some things that your customers are excited about in the pipeline?
The herbicide tolerances, I've never had as many calls about anything as I have the herbicide tolerance in milo. And we keep saying, oh, it's a year out, and we're finally seeing it now. We've got farmer demos of it, so they're getting to look at that. Because that's been a problem in sorghum since day one is weed control. And then the access we have to technology today is unbelievable. I'm overwhelmed with data some days and how to handle it and how to make the best decision of it. But whether it be things like climate field view, where I can get satellite imagery of my every one of my fields once a week, some of the stuff that's available to us now through some of the drone footage and scouting stands and wheat pressure, that we can do so much better there and have that information so much quicker than what we've ever had. Some of those things I think are really great, and we're seeing a lot more now too on the cattle program. They talked about the sedans and the forages a little bit, but we're doing a lot of work with that. For so many years, I sold sedan grass, and it was whatever's cheapest. Let's throw something out there. We'll plant it when we get around to planting it, and we'll harvest it when we get to it. We're worried about our milo. We're worried about our corn. It was treated as a second crop. And some of the advancements that are coming there, more even in just learning how to deal with the sedan, how to get the quality out of it, how we can hit 12, 15% protein with the sedan grass. I think that's going to change a lot of the cattle operations. And it's not so much even varieties. It's just learning how to manage what we have and put some resources into that. I think that's where a lot of excitement's going to come, I believe.
Good. That brings to mind, my dad always had forage sorghums. We put up silage for our cattle herd, and I can remember, that was kind of the last thing that was on his plate, beyond the other crops. Eric, you are a wheat farmer, and we know that wheat has an uphill battle, it seems, where you're competing for acres. We mentioned in the previous session that wheat acres are down 30% since 2000. I'm seriously trying not to take that to heart since that's when I started writing about wheat. Maybe I'm cursed. I don't know. But what are you looking forward to as a wheat farmer with some of the tools that are now available to the wheat breeders that we've never been able to utilize before?
Yeah, so I think there's some real excitement around some of those things. There's some new things coming with some of the herbicide tolerance with the coaxium brand, adding some more ability to handle joint grass and rye and some of those things. That's good. And there's other things coming in the pipeline. Yield potential is starting to hit this pace where it's really increasing. And even in these tougher years, this year for us was really dry and our yields weren't great, but we had some wheats that kind of stood out above and beyond what we've seen in the past. And I think that's pretty exciting. It's a little scary too, because if we push the yields, now we don't need as many acres, and we've already trimmed acres quite a little bit. And so it's a little scary from that standpoint. But I see a lot of positives coming from it in the end, that will help us in the long run.
Well, now you're getting ready to start planting wheat here shortly, any week now or so. And, how are you planning on giving your wheat a leg up this fall? What are you planning to try that you haven't done that something different?
I don't know that we have anything big on the horizon this year that we're going to try. We actually last year we dabbled with a little spring wheat and planted a few acres of spring wheat just to see if we could make it work. We harvested the corn off last fall and planted spring wheat in. With as dry as it wasn't, I wouldn't call it highly successful. The yields were very, very poor, but the quality really wasn't bad. We had decent protein and just okay test weight for a spring wheat. The advantage is it does let us go back to a summer crop next year instead of having a fallow period in there. And so I'm anxious to see how that works out for us. But as far as our winter wheat going in the ground here in a few weeks, we don't have any big plans of anything. We may dabble with a few small things, but we don't have any big plans for anything right
now. Okay. Kent, you should be looking, down the pipe at planting your fall wheat crop or your winter wheat crop. Any changes that you're planning on making?
No, probably not that much. I do expect I will plant more than I typically do, and I think a lot of that is the value of the residue. I saw that value stick out more this year in terms of weed control, and back when it didn't rain every other day, there was a period of time there where we really needed that moisture. So I will plant a lot of wheat for that value. I think the things that I will do will stick pretty true to your conservative production. The one thing I don't always do is I don't always treat all of my wheat seed. I think we will do more seed treatments this year than we typically do. Also saw a lot of value this last year in some fungicide applications. I usually evaluate those pretty hard, and so my tolerance level before I apply a fungicide will be less this year than it has been in the past. So I think those things will add value. They're relatively low cost and have the potential of really providing a lot of good return.
Speaking of seed treatments, we heard from Ruhia Deardahl-Young from BASF about wireworm control. Oklahoma, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't you had some problems with some wireworms in that area or in parts of Oklahoma? Or was it fall armyworm?
It's usually the fall armyworm, although we are starting to see some wireworm problems. It hasn't been one that's been big in the past.
Okay. I suppose that's going to add one more thing to your checklist for scouting fields.
That's right. You got to keep these agronomists busy or we'll get in trouble.
Never have an agronomist with idle time on his hands, people.
That's right.
Well, now, Charlie, water is a growing concern in the plains, and granted, you're over in Larned, and you have a little bit more water availability than most people far out west. But what are you concerned about for your sorghum and your customers' sorghum? With us competing more and more for water with other entities, how does sorghum help you and help your customers manage the water issue in the plains?
Sorghum's been really good. We're getting a lot of pivots, even though we've been wet here the last 8 years. I'm getting a lot of pivots, particularly if you go right south of Larned. North of Larned is all dry land. South of Larned is you run into irrigation. But we're getting a lot of pivots where our water is dropping. What used to be an 800-gallon well is, down to 5. What used to be a 600-gallon well now down to 2 or 3. And corn, it's kind of taking corn out of some of those markets a little bit because we're just losing the big water. And sorghum's a great choice there. If you run low on water in the middle of the summer, it will not go to zero. You might not have the big yield that you were looking for, but at least you can still have a good crop. So, seeing a lot more sorghum, seeing a lot of grazing of sedans, where some of these commodity prices have been down a little bit. The cattle program has come into play a little bit. Some of these limited water circles are where they've overpumped their allocation. We're going to sedan and plant it to graze all summer. When they run out of water, they stop and see how long it lasts. So it's kind of given us a help. As you move west, it's only becoming a bigger issue. A lot more forage sorghum out there where we used to have corn silos. So I guess it gives us an alternative there.
Okay. Folks, don't forget, if you've got questions, go ahead and click on the chat button at the bottom of the screen, and you can type those in the box that pops up. Moving on, what's one lesson that you will take away from sorghum and wheat ewe that you'll apply to farming methods either in 21 or 2022? And Charlie, you've got the floor.
I don't know. I enjoyed the fertility discussion, looking at some of the other things. I sometimes get caught on the majors and, forget the sulfur and some of those other things that we also need to be paying attention to. Probably watch that and, and some of the herbicide discussions. Where are we going to go there and which one's going to play out the best? Which one's going to give us the most control? And how are we going to layer it in with everything else that we're doing as far as chemical?
Okay. And Eric, same for you. What's one lesson that you're going to take from the speakers from this year's sorghum and wheat ewe?
Yeah, I think the fertility will be something that we've always watched, but it's good to be reminded of it and bring it back to the forefront and think about some of the things that we need to be doing. The herbicide discussion, like he said, is very important, I think. And just watching what happens with wheat as we move forward and some of the innovations that are coming out of that and the innovations out of sorghum.
Okay. Well, now, Kent, we heard from Jordan Bell, who spoke about working with large-scale dairies to source wheat silage crop for their needs. That's just one more market that is opening up and developing for wheat crops. There's ongoing research into winter durum for pasta at K-State. There's even some Oklahoma growers that are growing some wheat for pasta and tortilla markets. We see this new market for forage sorghums. So, what grabs your interest in considering these new markets? And as a consultant, how do you have that conversation with a grower about, have you tried this idea? Have you tried looking over here for dollars on the table?
Sure. Well, I think it's an interesting discussion and interesting things to talk about and think about. All the options need to be on the table. And I love to think a little bit outside the box or a little bit differently than most to ask ourselves. And that's what I think is really neat about a forum like this, is it gives us the opportunity to listen to people and say, is what we've been doing what we should be doing, or can we try something new that might give us an edge or an opportunity or something else we can do? So, I always think back to the logistics of it. Am I or is someone I'm talking to in an area and in a position that they're close enough to a specialty market or a specialty use for a crop like that we can take it there and that we can capitalize on doing that different management or using that as a different product. So those are the things that I ask. Then the second thing is, do we have the conditions and the ability to grow that for the special need that it is? Can we grow a durum wheat? Can we produce a sorghum that has the characteristics that someone out there in the world wants? One of the things that I've come to realize over time in working with different commodities and different organizations is there are people out there looking for something very specific in your crop. The hard part is connecting those two people together. Some people have the desire to grow the specialty crop but can't find the market, and some people want the crop but can't find the grower or can't find the person in the right position for that. So when you marry those two together, it's a really neat thing to see, someone who can and will grow it to provide it to an end user that really has that desire to have that product. And I think that's really fantastic when we can do that. It's very unique, but very fantastic.
That brings to mind, Eric, you have in your rotation, you've got beans, what was it? Peas or black-eyed peas? Pinto beans.
Yeah.
I knew there was a dry edible in there somewhere. But you've got those, you've tinkered with spring wheat. You don't strike me as a man that's afraid to, try something. Do these new uses for wheat, do they kind of pique your interest, especially with the large number of large dairies in a close area to you?
Yeah, there are. Something that I always try to do is look for some new things to try out, and we don't want to go too grand of a scale with it, but take a few acres and try it and see, can we make it work? Does it look like it'll be successful? And we're always looking for things, and I think there's some possibilities down the road. One of the challenges always becomes, can you find a market for it? As Kent mentioned, it's okay, I can grow it, but if there's nobody to buy it or it's too far to get it somewhere, am I going to be successful at it? So you have to evaluate that, and you have to try to find things that fit into what you're doing and also fit into what's around you and that you can utilize. And but there's some good possibilities out there with that look exciting to me. So
maybe this is a personal question, but how do you find your markets? Is it just, making some phone calls, or you've got some friends that know a friend?
Sure. Well, some of the things we're doing obviously fit into what we've been doing long term, and we have long term relationships there. The spring wheat came about by some discussion with some people in the seed wheat business and some people we've been working with on marketing, and just the idea of looking at it and thinking about it. And there's been several different people across our area looking at it and trying a few acres. And I don't know that anybody's been highly successful. I've heard some decent results from some people. And there's a market in Kansas City that's really looking for that to add some protein and that milling and baking quality that spring wheat brings. And so, like I said, that's where some of that's having connections and discussions through peer groups and other things that have really been beneficial to us. And the other things are just long-term things that continue on, I guess.
That reminds me, I didn't ask this question the first go around, but are there questions that you panelists have for the other panelists? I'll open it up. Kent? Charlie? Oh, seriously, not the three of you have no questions for each other. That's rare that Kent doesn't have a question for another panelist.
Well, I don't know where to start. What I think would be interesting is, and I know it's a part of the purpose of this group, but always trying to think between the lines on the discussions. how the value of wheat and sorghum come together, as an entire crop rotation value. I think I can't point a question to any one person, but I think it's, maybe as a sorghum U and wheat U event, the concluding slide should always be, how does my topic pull the two crops together, and how does one benefit the other? Because I know for me, there are people here in my area who grow wheat without sorghum, but I don't know any sorghum growers that grow sorghum without wheat. It is very much a complementary crop, and most of the people in my area who do grow wheat without sorghum probably should be growing something else, and sorghum would make a great option for them. So I think that's it. All of my questions would have to open back up presentations again.
Well, I think the two tie together from the standpoint, for me, it's a labor issue. It spreads out that harvest, spreads some things around, and then it becomes a weed control issue. And, my sorghum behind wheat, when I do the averages, is somewhere around 20 to 25 bushel an acre better, under most circumstances. But boy, it's getting hard to make that wheat decision when I run the budgets on wheat. And I've got to get to 50 plus bushels to even hit break evens. That's what makes it hard for me, as I'm sitting here trying to decide if I plant the wheat that I was planning on planting. But when they sure complement each other well, it just, you need to get that wheat price back up a little bit.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think their comments fit very well. I think they do complement each other very well, and you can't have one without the other in a lot of ways. And our wheat acres are going to go up this fall because we see that with our corn and with our other stuff on our dryland acres, the value of the wheat in that rotation and how it complements the other crops and brings value to them through weed control and through moisture retention and other things.
Okay.
Well, and Jennifer, if I can, in regard to what Charlie was saying there, I went through the time with less wheat, and that was largely a part of adding in another crop into the rotation, kind of changing the rotation up. We got into some sesame. We needed to get into different phases, and things have gotten out of whack. My technical term there, it's out of whack. And now I'm realizing how much value that wheat had, which is the reason why I intend to plant more wheat this year than I typically do. One of the things I think is neat about wheat as a cover crop is, to be real honest, I can look at it in March and say, does it look like something I want to take to yield, or does it look like it's a cover crop? And I can make the decision at that time if it was a cover crop. That's when the neighbors drive by and said, what are you doing out there? Oh, don't worry, it's a cover crop. Or, hey, that looks great. Yeah, I meant to do that. So that will help me a lot, I think. And as we go back onto the presentations, when we think about nutrient movement, nutrient runoff, we think about herbicides, the need for herbicide tolerance. Using the crops together can minimize that need for herbicide tolerance in some of our crops. And so, those are the things that keeps me thinking, that I think Charlie, I can't remember if it was Charlie or Eric that mentioned rye in our last panel discussion, thinking about the weed suppression that rye gives, even though rye is a bad word for most of us. So thinking those things through, and how can we use the cropping systems and the biology about our systems to minimize our dependence on some of these things that we're developing as technologies that maybe we don't always need to depend on quite as much. Just another thought there.
Well, now, before we head out, we had Roger McEwen at the top of yesterday and talking about the legal issues and that we need to watch out for the future of our farms. And we know that production is one part of the stool, marketing is another part of the stool, but we also have to look for the future of our farming operations. is there something on your minds or on the minds of your neighbors as far as your farm structures or labor or taxation or anything like that? Maybe even aging on the farm, that is an issue that maybe pertains to the production part of farming, but it's that sustainability part of farming. And Charlie, I got you, so I'll let you go first.
I think the labor is going to be a huge issue. As I'm calling customers trying to sell them seed, I mean, if I had access to a stream of labor, it's almost ending what guys need as far as labor, and quality help is just really hard to find. It's amazing to me what some of these farmers are paying to try and get help, and how they're even struggling to keep them at some of the amounts they're paying. We see where the unemployment is across the country. I'm like, hey, come to farm country. We are looking for people. I think it's a little different work than what most of them are wanting to do.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd just hand over the keys to some of that equipment that you all have just to somebody off the street, because I know it's been a while since I've driven a tractor or a combine, and I'd at least have to take a test drive with somebody in the buddy seat with me.
Yeah.
The first 20 days.
Thought attorney, someone that has never been on a $500,000 combine, but loose is a little scary. Even on, and that's the problem too. So much of this equipment. When I started, you were pulling a 3-bladed undercutter with a 130 horsepower tractor. I mean, you couldn't tear a whole lot up real quick. But today, the dollar amounts on just a little hiccup are kind of frightening.
Yep. Eric, how about you? What's something that you and your neighbors talk about when you talk?
Yeah, labor is a major issue. I think across all of farm country, there's a lot of issues with labor. We're utilizing the H2A program to help us with that some. That's been a huge benefit to us. And I think that program needs to continue to help us in agriculture. He's right. There's a lot of unemployment, and it'd be nice to draw those people to the farm to help out here. But there's some challenges with that. Like you said, we have very high dollar equipment, and you just don't turn anybody loose with it. You need some training and belief that they can handle the equipment, and belief from them that they can handle the equipment comes down to it. Another issue that I see as a big issue is the transition from where we are. We have an aging farm community, and that transition's coming, and how that's going to look and what's going to happen with that as we transition to the next generation, if you will. We're all at different stages of that, but it's coming as we watch this age rise in agriculture.
That reminds me, Weskan's not that large of a community. About everybody knows.
It's very small.
Yeah, but it's a typical representation of what we have out here on the plains, because we have a lot of land mass, but we're really concentrated in small little pockets here and there. And with folks wanting to age on the farm, those communities they see some more emphasis on certain aspects of community life or offerings. In Weskan, do you see more services for older folks, or is it tough to find a hospital? How's your Wi-Fi? I mean, today we're seeing it's really great, but is this a random occurrence of good?
Yes, we have challenges. We are very rural here. My wife did a grant for the school to get some playground equipment, and they said put Frontier on there. We're not rural, we're Frontier here. And I've always thought that was fascinating that they find us as Frontier. And in a lot of ways we are Frontier, I guess, but we don't think of ourselves quite that backwoods either. We've been fortunate in our community. We've had a lot of young people come back that most have ties to the farm. Some don't, because we have some internet access and things that have allowed them to do other businesses or be involved other ways, either remotely or even in the community. And so that's been a positive. But you're right. There are some of those other things. Our hospitals are getting farther and farther away for us. And some of those things are becoming more challenging.
They are. Well, Kent, when you and your neighbors sit and talk about farming and just the business of farming, you're also a consultant. So what are some things that weigh heavy on your mind?
Well, I think the aging farmer is probably the top of the list. We are in an area here where we are on the verge of a transition. A lot of guys are getting to the age where they simply cannot do it anymore. They're either trying to find people to hire or they're transitioning out. So that's a big one, but that combined with the difficulty of income on the farm. It's a sad day when you talk to your neighbor and he literally breaks down and cries because he doesn't know if he can make it to next year. And what that makes me think about when we talk about transitions is some of our farm community cannot afford the ownership costs of land alone or the rental costs of land alone. So what will we do when this huge amount of land is available and we have relatively few young farmers out here to take advantage of that? And how will we operate? It's a very difficult situation. And a lot of those conversations are very deep heart-to-heart conversations because they're difficult ones to have.
They are indeed. They are indeed, Kent. Well, now, as we wrap this up.
If I can interrupt one.
Sure, Charlie.
Panelists, but as I've called on customers and my dad's still highly involved in our operation. He's 80. And I work with some farmers that are, in their mid 70s, 70s up into 80s that are still farming, highly active until they absolutely cannot get to the farm anymore. I don't think they'll ever quit. Physically they cannot. But I also have a lot of customers now in that 60 range that are starting to talk retirement. And I don't think that generation of farmers we're going to see farm forever. I mean, they're all starting to look at ways out. I was just kind of wondering if the other are seeing some of the same things in their areas, but I think we could almost see two generations quit at the same time, which
that's
is
interesting.
It's going to be interesting. But yeah, a lot of my 60-year-old farmers are already talking. They're looking for an exit plan right now, and I think some of it's economic. They don't want to lose any more than they have. But I was just wondering if anybody else is seeing that.
Well, and it might also be that generation, that boomer generation, the late boomers, early Gen Xers that just saw the previous generations and said, you know what, I'd like to retire and have a retirement and enjoy grandkids. And this is something that, it's time for the next generation to take it on, and we will be the mentor instead of the mentee. Eric, Kent, do you guys see some of those trends in your areas?
I do. Yes, I see some guys who I think they simply got worn out. They pushed as hard as they could push, and as some of our neighbors say, it's no fun anymore. It's hard. It's very difficult financially, mentally, difficult on relationships. And some of those guys who pushed that hard for that long, trying to make it work, and as Charlie said, having a difficult time financially making it work, the option is to say, right now I'm financially secure, let's just get out.
Yep, I can see that.
I think we're seeing some of that in our community as well, of that almost two generations retiring at the same time. I think some of that, maybe a piece of that anyway, is we went from a way of life to more of a business, and so people have a different approach to it. The difference in like you said, the baby boomers versus the Gen X, there's some of that transition there. And one of the things I see in our community, like I said, we've had a lot of young people come back that grew up here, and we do have a pretty strong bunch of young people ready to take some things on, and in some ways they're struggling right now because there just aren't quite enough acres available for them to step in and really take something on that's big enough. And they're doing some other things on the side to try to help that out and survive during these lean times.
You know, Dad always said, if there's a will, there is a way, and we always figure out a way. And sometimes it's 2 jobs. It's working a day job during the hours. That's why we actually planned for a session to start at 5, because we wanted to see if we could open it up to folks that were coming home from after working in town and be able to catch something while they were having a meal with the family. So to end this on a positive note, what brings you hope as a farmer? What is something that when you look at it and you say, you know what, that's job well done, whether that's your family, your community, or the crops that you raise. And Eric, you've got the screen.
Yeah, I think one of the things I always think of and come back to is just the people in agriculture and being around the people in agriculture. I'm involved with some peer groups that spread across big areas and lots of different parts of the country. And for the most part, people in ag are the same. And it's always good to get together and discuss things and not only talk about the good things, but the bad things too, and lean on each other a little bit. And there's just a lot of good people in agriculture, and that's something that I always appreciate about being in this business.
Well, we appreciate you.
Thanks.
And Charlie?
I think it is about the people, working with different people. And that's part of why I love the sales, is I get to interact with so many different farmers. But, and it's become a business, but it is still a lifestyle. I mean, and, right now we've had a wonderful summer. We've had rains when we needed them. And there's still nothing about, driving out. And, the Milo's all headed. It looks like $1 million. We know we're sitting on a great fall harvest. You get into that scenario, and it's kind of why you do it again, and I beat all the odds. Can I battle Mother Nature? Can I go through all of it? And can I grow something? And when you see it in the field, it still makes you want to go back and fight it all and do it again.
There is always that next crop, that next calf, that next thing just over the horizon, and the next month in the calendar, and there's always something growing and something getting harvested, and that's a beautiful part of agriculture. I agree, and you are right. I try not to play crop favorites, but I've got to tell you, the time of the season that Milo is at its peak beautiful part is where you've also got the sweet sun.
Yeah.
And it you just can't beat a Milo picture. It's an awful pretty picture. And Kent, what brings you hope?
I appreciate both of those things. The people, I've said this to you in the past on some interviews. I would not be here if it was not for the people who are around me. That's why I am where I am. The passion and the faith that farmers have to do what they do. I don't think you can be a happy farmer without a passion for what you do. Great people, great passion. And for me, it's the miracle of life that comes from a seed coming out of the ground. For me, there's nothing like the time when my wife teases me about my millions of little babies out there, all in a perfect straight row. That just fascinates me. I just love watching that happen, to see the energy from a little seed and the management that we do to it to turn it into food for people. The passion that comes behind that, that's what drives me.
Yep. I got to say, you all make my job as an agricultural journalist so rewarding, because I don't just make up, I don't make up the stories. I tell your stories. And so, I always appreciate being able to call y'all up and pick your brains and ask for your expertise, and also know that I get to tell the stories of really amazing people that do amazing things for the world. So thank you very much for being on the panel today. And folks, that wraps it up. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for riding along with us here on the first ever virtual Sorghum and Wheat U. A reminder, These recordings will be posted at hpj.com/SUWU. Be sure to share them with your friends and neighbors who may not have been able to follow along live. Registered attendees will receive a survey in their email boxes, and as you know, if you're a regular attendee of High Plains Journal's U events, we take the feedback that you give us very seriously in creating next year's event. As you might imagine, we are reinventing our programming platforms right now as we speak, and so we could sure use all the feedback that you could give us to make sure that we craft session topics and session times and schedules that will help you. So please let us know how we're doing and what we could be doing better. Thanks again to all of our lovely, wonderful, flexible sponsors. And remember, you can see more about them in the registration details that were emailed to you. And if you like this format for learning, let us know. And remember, Cattle U is now going virtual as well. That will be September 8th through the 11th, and you can register for free at cattleu.net. We have a whole week's worth of sessions planned, and so you want to get your registrations in now. On behalf of all of us here at High Plains Journal and all of our sponsors and our lovely speakers, thank you again for riding along with us, and we'll see you on the trail.
Dirt road in a gooseneck, saddle up with me. Dry land in God's country, crops far as I can see. The headlights